Good morning. It's great to see y'all this morning. I know as you and I reflect on this coming year, my guess is one of the situations that you're hoping that you don't find yourself in is one where someone's looking at you for advice and help, and you feel completely ill-prepared and not a clue what to say. Unfortunately, this happens to me more times than it should. It kind of comes with the territory of being human, really, but especially being actually a parent. But I'm thinking about being a pastor in particular. I was, remember one specific time, I was, around 30-ish years old, had been married for a while, and had at least a couple kids at that point. And got a phone call from a couple that was at our church. Now, at this time, the church had grown to a pretty good size, and so there was lots of folks in the church that I did not know. I was the children's pastor at the time, so I mainly worked with little kids, which was right along with my level. I could deal with that. And occasionally I would deal with their parents. But this couple had no little kids, but they did have a son and a daughter-in-law who were in desperate need to meet with someone for some pastoral counseling. And so they were wondering if I would be willing to meet with them. Why they called me and not the lead pastor or some of the other pastors, I don't know, but I'm the one they call, and I agreed to do it because, that's kind of in the job description. And so I sat down with this couple. Now, again, remember, I'm around 30-ish, and they seem to me to be a young couple. So I don't know how they are, but they were in their 20s. They were somewhat newly married, and so I started with my standard line, "How can I serve you?" Because all I knew is that they needed some pastoral counseling. And so they began to tell their story. They had been married for a little while. I forgot how long it was, but it wasn't too long. And they had decided to spice up their marriage by watching pornography together. And initially, it was very exciting. It was something that they enjoyed together. But this had kind of led to a spiral of things and to the culmination where she had been sleeping with a relative of his. And this kind of all kind of came out. And it was an interesting conversation because you could just see that both of them, not just her, but both of them were lost. They were in a cage, if you would, of their own making. He understood that even though that she had cheated on him, that he kind of encouraged the fuel by some of the things that they were watching and whatnot. And so they looked across the table and said, "Pastor, what do we do?" Now inside I'm like, what are you asking me for? I had not a clue what that they should do. Now you got to understand, I'm not naive. I understand the way the world works. I had brothers and sisters who did everything under the sun, and I saw my parents deal with that. But myself and my little brother kind of chose a different road. Some people might have called us goody two-shoes. And at times, in some ways we were, and sometimes in ways we weren't, but that's besides the point. And my lovely bride, same thing. I mean, both of us have pretty boring backgrounds, and we're both pretty good kids. And so there's some issues and things that people come to me that are dealing with, like this couple, and I'm just like, I have no experience to draw from. A personal experience. I have other people's experience to draw from, but not personal experience to draw from. They had, like I said, they put themselves in this cage. They felt like they were on this truck of lust, if you would, heading downhill, and the brakes had gone out. and they wanted me to stop the truck. And honestly, all I did was I listened. I asked a few questions. I established that they didn't want to live this way anymore, that they understood that not only the end result, but maybe what got to the end result was not the way they wanted to live. And they agreed. And they agreed that they want to continue in the marriage. And so I prayed for them and said, let's find you a professional counselor. Let's find you a Christian counselor that has had experience, not necessarily maybe personal experience, but has led people through this, because they needed more than a Bible verse. They needed more than some guy, whose life experience was different, just telling them, just try harder, don't do this stuff. Because, like I say, the truck had no brakes. And it was already kind of part of their marriage, their personalities, if you would, their mental makeup, and they needed to begin to unpack that. Now, this is just one of the many cases where someone comes to me, and honestly, down deep, what I want to tell them is the best solution was really prevention, not the cure. You can't, it's too late to say that. It's too late. By the way, I have those old areas in my life, so I'm not pointing fingers here. But I'm just saying there's a lot of things that people come to just like, we should have talked 5 years ago, right? We should have. I always tell parents that the things you deal with when your kid's a teenager are the things you dealt with or didn't deal with when they were 2. They just become more sophisticated at them when they're 13, 14, and 15 years old. Now, this is one of the reasons, this root problem is why Jesus addresses us in Matthew chapter 5. Remember this whole idea of upping your game, where Jesus tells them this radical idea. I tell you, Matthew 5:20, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of God. Now, this kind of shook them. How could anyone be more religious than the religious leaders? They're the leaders for a reason. And in essence, what Jesus does is he begins to explain that what you've been taught are these things out here, but what I want to address is the heart. And the first one we addressed last week was the outward act of murder, which is wrong, but also then the inward feeling, the inward attitude of anger. And that brings us to the heart of the matter for today. Jesus' second thing in this challenge to up our game. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and 28, Jesus says this. He says, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks on a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. So again, Jesus begins by saying, you've heard about this outside rule. This outside rule is as it is in the 10 Commandments. You can read this in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5, that once you make a commitment to your spouse, in this example, a man to the woman, you've heard that it is wrong. As a matter of fact, in Deuteronomy 22, the death penalty is given to those who cheat on their spouse. Now, this wasn't practice. It's just saying that was how serious it was. That you sleep with somebody else other than the one that you eternally, that for this lifetime you committed to. I am committed to you. That is wrong. And for the most part, even in our world, that is somewhat embraced. We all have our little addendums and whatnot, unless the person, it's a loveless marriage and yada, yada, yada. It was over a long time ago, yada, yada, yada. But basically, we don't look very good on cheating on someone. And this is what the religious leaders were telling them in Jesus' time. But Jesus says, well, you've heard that, and I'm not undoing that. But he goes on to say, but I'm telling you that if you just look at a woman and you lust after her, you've basically, before God, committed the same crime. You've committed the crime in your heart. Now, this idea of lust is exactly what you think it is. It's a strong, uncontrolling desire it could be used for food, for sex, for whatever. It's basically this uncontrolled desire, the itch I have to itch no matter what the kind of cost kind of a thing is. The idea when he says, if you look upon a woman, it's not just a casual glance. It's not just saying, hey, she's cute, she's pretty, right? But it's lingering on that and then objectifying that person in your mind, using them to kind of alleviate or make yourself feel better by playing out a scenario in your mind, internally. And what Jesus explains is that adultery out here really begins in the heart. It begins by nurturing what this couple found out, nurturing that lust, that beast within us. The scriptures at another place says that all other sins are outside the body, but sexual sin, there's something spiritual. It's a sin against yourself. That is why one of the reasons that rape and abortion and having sex too early or too often or with too many partners, and these things leave scars that we deal with for our entire life. And for many people, they can't even put a finger on it because the world has told them it's so healthy for them. It's so good for them. And yet the walls that we have between us and our partner, between the way we view these things, is deeply, deeply hurtful. Now, this commandment, sometimes we try to play this game, kind of like with anger. It's like, is anger the only emotion? Because that's what he mentions, anger. So you can feel spite and jealousy, and as long as you don't feel anger or hate in your heart, right, then it's okay. No. Any more than this principle is, okay, well, we're just talking about adultery. So if she's not married, or he's Fabio, then it's okay, right? No. Because the principle isn't just acting out. What he's probably saying is that the desire of your heart reflects your heart. And your heart should be respectful and loving towards all people. It should not use them as objects. He's not limiting his command. What he's saying is this is the principle. It's not just the act. It is the lust, in whatever form, that we turn around in our hearts. Now, he's not condemning. Remember, God created, the whole idea of sex was God's idea. We are created for it. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's basic biology. All right? We're created for it. He was the one who told the first married couple, Adam and Eve, go be fruitful and multiply. I'm not going to explain to you how that's done. I think you could figure that out. It's his idea. So he's not condemning a natural interest in the opposite sex or healthy sexual desire, especially within a committed relationship. But the deliberate and repeated filling of one's mind with fantasies that, if acted out, would be evil, would be wrong. That's what he's addressing. And then he goes on to give us a principle. At first blush, by the way, this principle is like, whoa. But as we unpack this, I think you'll say, oh, it makes sense. So after he says this, he says, starting in verse 29, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. It's the same word hell that we saw last week. That Jewish and now Christian idea of eternal separation from God. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. So again, this is a general principle. He talks about the eye, that's obvious because we're talking about lust, but he also talks about the hand. The idea is if sin itself, if something that you're entertaining or it's 3 steps back from the actual sin, but it's going to lead to that sin, then stop it. Do whatever you have to do from it to grow. You see, these things that we think are just private sins, right? They're just internal. They're just hidden. They're secret. They don't harm anybody. And in the world's mind, it works that way. But it doesn't work in God's eyes that way, nor does it really work that way. God is not bound by our privacy. Our thoughts and emotions are as visible to him as our actions. That's why I keep saying I believe judgment is going to be your thoughts and your emotions and not just your actions. Except that it'll be exposed to all that are there. So when Jesus says, pluck out your eye or cut off your hand, I don't believe he's talking about literally, especially since the object is lust. And so even if you take out your eyes, it doesn't stop you from thinking bad thoughts. You'd have to pluck out your brain for that. That's not what he's talking. What he's saying is to nurture lust and to cut off those things that lead to that. It's the action of surgically cutting sin out of our lives. Just like if you had something, sometimes there's such a problem with a hand or a foot or some kind of limb that if they leave it, it will affect the rest of the body. So in rare cases, but in some cases it gets so bad they say, you got to cut off that hand. We got to cut off that hand. We got to cut off that foot to save the rest. In the same way, believers, those who follow Jesus, not just Christians, because I think a lot of Christians are just religious people. They would not be up for this. Religious people want to live their lives like everyone else, but just do religious things. I'm talking to those folks, whatever name that they carry. I'm talking about those who are followers of Jesus, should willingly, sometimes with God's help, most of the time with God's help, cut off any temptation or habit or part of our nature that could lead us away from Jesus, from his heart, from love. And we need to more and more nurture a committed heart. Not just committed actions out here, but a committed heart. Internally, our desire, our motivation. The reason Jesus explains is that we better to have lost some worldly attitude or possession or something that we even really like to do so that we won't be thrown into hell because we're dragged down into our own desires. Matter of fact, remember that's the whole, remember when Jesus tells that parable about the 4 seeds? One of them falls among the thorns and it actually, a plant begins to grow, but it says the worries of this life and things of this life choke it out and it dies. I think there's a lot of people who initially respond to God, but then all of a sudden they understand what it costs them. It costs them these fantasies. It costs them their life, their will, and they're like, I don't want to kill that stuff off. And so the word of God in them is killed off. Now listen, we are believers in the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. And the good news of Jesus Christ is he did for us what we cannot do ourselves. And when we understand what we cannot do ourselves is we cannot be perfect, not even halfway to perfect. Including what we cannot do is to keep all the time our thoughts pure. This is included in this. But that doesn't preclude us, because of our love for God and our pursuit of him, to want to watch our thoughts, motives, and temptations. After all, if you have a healthy marriage, when you got married to someone, your spouse, right? There are certain ways that you interacted with the opposite sex that you no longer interacted with them that way out of respect for that relationship. It's the same thing with those who love God. When we find a destructive habit or thought pattern, we need to cut it out, throw it away. Now, we have to ask the question. It's a great question. How do we take this principle? Is it, all right, like, for instance, let's say the issue is pornography, right? Should I go to the doctor and have my eyes plucked out? Should I just say, you know what, I'm never going to own a computer or a phone or go to the beach? Or is it just a matter of, you know what, I'm going to make sure there's accountability software on my computer or my phone, or, you know, if I go to the beach, I'm going to make sure to take my spouse with me, or whatever the case may be. Which is that? And what I would say to you is, I would kind of use an example of this. Normally, you would not walk up to a light socket and stick your finger in it. That is not a good thing. However, if you were in the hospital and your heart stopped, part of the prescription of getting your heart going again is to do the radical thing of electrocuting you. Now, there's a minimum and a maximum of electricity they use. Guess what they don't start with? The maximum. They don't start with the maximum. Because though they want your heart to go, they don't want to do damage while they do it. So they start on the minimum. If that doesn't do it, they turn it up a little bit more. If that doesn't do it, then they turn it up to the maximum. Now, they do it only because your heart is stopped. You're about to die. And whatever damage they do with electricity is secondary to the fact you're going to die. But on the other hand, they don't go right to the extreme. And I think when it comes to the sin in our lives, it's a great principle. If this sin is going to drag us away, we need to do something radical. But that doesn't mean we need to pluck the eyes out right away. It means we start on the small thing. By the way, the small thing is usually confession. That's the small thing, just telling someone. A brother or sister in Christ that'll hold you accountable. And then there's other things, and there's accountability, and then you kind of increase it, whatever it takes to keep your eyes on Jesus. You may continually struggle with it, but you're heading in that direction. You're doing what you can do to glorify God and to keep yourself on the road following Him. So let me talk a little bit about this idea of plucking things out and cutting things out that lead to danger. Again, this isn't just a biblical principle, it's a life principle. And if you've ever been in any kind of recovery program or environment, you know that this is something that is common. Folks stop doing things that other quote-unquote normal people can do, but they stop doing it because for them, it leads to the thing that's killing them. There is this thing, for instance, in AA, this saying in AA that says an alcoholic can't stop from taking the second drink. In other words, once they take that first drink, they're doomed. And here comes the second, that there is no self-control between 1 and 2. So they don't focus on self-control between glass 1 or 2. They focus on what leads to glass 1. What are those things that are in your life that leads to the first drink? And based on that, that's what they suggest you cut out, you deal with in your life. So for instance, I know alcoholics who they know that this certain street, this downtown street has 5 bars on it. They never go downtown. They never go downtown. It's just too tempting to walk into one. I know people who are recovering, especially from drugs, and for that matter, but especially drugs, who are like, anyone that I ever used with, I cannot, especially those first 2 years, I cannot hang out with them. I can't talk with them on the phone. I definitely can't go to their parties. I can't. And you think, whoa, I mean, that's radical. Just completely cut your friends, your old life out. Well, if you're an addict, you understand that those old tapes, those old nature, that wanting to please others, be part of the crowd, you can't do that. I know almost most men, if not people that I talk to, need to put some kind of software on their computer and or their phone to hold them accountable to staying away from pornography. It's just too easy. It's just too tempting. It's too prevalent. And I'm talking about the church. I'm not even talking about the world. For the world, it's just normal, healthy. I know folks who will not watch TV, that will not watch movies. Because just the nature of their life and the world, something that's benign as Beverly Hills 90210. But it just feeds into the drama of old tapes and leads them to places that they don't need to go. Certain images in R-rated movies leads them to places they just do not need to go. I know folks who will not listen to secular music because their entire non-following Christ life was linked with secular music and all the idiotic stuff that they're addicted to. And they just can't listen to secular music without those thoughts and feelings and desires coming up. So they don't listen to it. There's a lot of secular music I'm a huge fan of. And it just seems crazy to me that you can't listen to John Denver. But for some people, that may be the deal for them. We had one person in our church that could not enter into Asian restaurants. They have the little, for us it just seems like it's nothing. It's a little Buddha, this little thing, but to them it's an altar. It's a reminder of the Buddhism of their past and what they were raised with and sacrilegion, and they can't even go into those places. It's those things that not just like that's evil because it shows the ankle, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those things, and you know what they are. They're personal things that really drag you to places that you should not be, and they're 3 steps back from the actual thing. They're 3 steps back from the actual thing. They're the thing that leads to the thing that definitely leads to the thing. See, the object is to remove the thing that leads to the stumbling block, not to deal with the stumbling block itself, right? If you're already typing in whatever porn website it is, that's not the time to try all your heart and all your might not to go there. You're pretty much done with. It's what keeps you from getting to that place in the first place. If you're sitting in the bar, right, and you're saying, should I order a drink or should I order a Coke? Well, you're already in trouble. You're an alcoholic. You have no business being in the bar in the first place. Or whatever the case may be. I mean, I don't know all your all's personal lives, but I know we all have these issues. So it's those 3 steps back. See, our goal, because of our Lord, is to cultivate a pure heart. Now, He's the only one who can make our hearts pure, and only the return of Jesus that Malcolm was talking about, where will we be we will be made pure. And part of that purification is a completely new body that doesn't have the old tapes and the nature to destroy itself the way our physical bodies do now. But that doesn't mean we go, oh, well, then there's just no hope. I'll just do whatever. No. That's what gets us in trouble. You guys know this, right? You start a diet, and then the next morning, right, somebody, oh my goodness, ordered donuts, right? And so you pick up, not even thinking, you pick up a donut and you eat a donut, or they magically show up at church and they've never been there before, and you eat a donut, right? Here's the I appreciate them, let me tell you. But here's for an example. Here's the human thinking. Oh, I had the donut. Well, I might as well forget the diet today, right? I'll start tomorrow, and so you don't. And then tomorrow comes, you're like, well, it's Monday now. I'll start on the weekend. You guys know the rest, right? You guys know the rest. We want to cultivate a pure heart, examine our lives for anything that causes us to get our eyes off of Jesus. See, that's the idea, is to get our eyes off of Jesus. It's not this prudish kind of no for no sake. It's wanting to honor God because we believe honoring God's the best way to live, and to take every necessary action to remove those things from our lives. Now, if you do this, you need to be prepared. I'm telling you right now, you need to be prepared for backlash. Right? Many of you are aware of all the many articles that have been written, and all the trouble that Mike Pence, their past vice president, received because he would not meet with a woman one-on-one without somebody else present. Now, Whether or not he should or shouldn't, especially if it's in public, that's a secondary debate. But what I would say is that someone who's trying to stay right by their spouse, by holding boundaries, should probably be more celebrated than demonized. But our culture, I mean, go read the articles. It's hard to find a positive one that's not like from a Christian magazine. That demonized him, made fun of him. And yet, left and right, people in media and politicians, all of a sudden it's coming out how they said these awful things to people, how they treated people awfully or in an inappropriate manner. You know, the one thing you can't say about Mike Pence is those things. Why? Because he doesn't meet one-on-one with a woman who's not his wife. Amazing how that two are linked. Our own culture, even though now you're going to be persecuted, listen, our own culture is learning this. They'll never own up to it completely. They may take a nod to it, but they won't own up to it completely. Let me just share with you one article that I recently came across. It's from the New York Times, the opinion section, written by Michelle Goldberg. The title of the article is Why Sex-Positive Feminism is falling out of fashion. Sex positive means sex is a great thing. Do it and do it as often as you can. It's part of your freedom, women. It's part of your freedom. It's your right. Be like the man. Just do it. That's what our girls are being sold. Being sold and have been sold, especially in colleges and areas of education and feminism all over the country. It's part of a positive attitude. Now, here's the interesting thing. She quotes something written by the philosopher, a modern philosopher, Amiya. I'm going to murder her last name, but it's Srinivasan, something like that. Amiya is quickly becoming one of the most high-profile feminist thinkers in the English-speaking world. And she, in her writing, describes teaching, she teaches at Oxford, her Oxford students, about a second-wave anti-porn activism. Now, this teacher, Amiya, this great philosopher, head of feminism, she assumes that her students, for whom porn is just a regular thing. It's an everyday part of life. It's just what we do. It's part of healthy sexuality. She assumes that they will find this anti-porn position prudish and passé. Prudish in that it sounds like the religious rhetoric that they grew up with or that they've heard others grew up with. Passé in that that's the old way we used to do things. And that's her assumption. But guess what? The students don't find it that way at all. They're in complete agreement with her assertions. Now, this Oxford is not this seminary, Christian college, university. And she's not teaching just everyday, she's teaching very secular feminists in the far as you can take feminism. There's a certain amount of feminism which is really great. But I'm talking about the way, way, way out there. And they're going, this garbage that people are intaking is bad. Now notice this. Porn, her students say, provides the script for their sex lives. One that leaves them insecure and alienated. Not my words. This feminist words. These non-Christian people's words. As a matter of fact, a man in her class was unsure if sex could ever be loving and mutual, based on what they were seeing. The women wondered if there was a connection between the lack of attention to female pleasure in so much porn, because porn is selfish. It is not sexuality. It is not healthy sexuality. It's not good sexuality. It's selfish, unadulterated, you are an object, please me sexuality. They were wondering if the lack of attention to female pleasure in so much porn and the lack of pleasure in their lives were linked. The warnings of the anti-porn feminists seem to have been belatedly realized Sex for my students is what porn says it is, she writes. And she goes on to say in this article that quotes one 23-year-old who says, it feels like this whole free sex kind of thing, like we were tricked into exploiting ourselves. Guess what? Yes, you were. Yes, you were. That's exactly what you were tricked into. That's exactly what society is trying to do. They're trying to trick you into your own self-destruction. Whether it's drinking, drugs, illicit sex, it's all, man, you want to experience life. It's so good. You're missing out. Don't be boring. Don't be all religious on me. Right? But behind it all is, man, I am lonely. I am miserable. I am isolated. Please join me. This is what I found sad. Just sad. There is now a term called demisexual. You know how there's all these different genders now and all these different LGBTQ plus whatever. We're going to be saying the whole alphabet here soon. Okay? There's now a word called demisexual. Demisexual refers to someone who's attracted only to people with whom they share an emotional connection. In other words, I actually like you. I actually desire you. I actually connect with you. So maybe we need a term for that. We need a term for that. Brothers and sisters in Christ, I want to be clear. God does not regulate sex because he wants to rob us. It's because he wants to bless us. Listen, I don't want to be one of these preachers that comes across like I'm yucky sex. Can't you believe people get it right? Shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person because I really feel like that's who Jesus is talking to. These pastors, these Pharisees, they pound their pulpits or they pound Moses' seat and they say, do not, do not, do not. And inside they're just filled with the yuckiest, most terrible guck in the world. What I want to communicate to you is your God loves you. He loves you and he loves this world and he wants you to get the most out of this world, most out of this life as you possibly can. He designed human beings. He designed sexuality. He designed pleasure, including in food and a lot of other things that we love to do. He designed it. And when fire is sitting in your fireplace, it's warm, it's glowing, it's got this magical thing and add to a great memory. Take the fire out of the fireplace in your home and your home burns down. God doesn't want your life, your home to burn down. That's what I want you to hear. I wish I could. Listen, we need help. I understand we need help. I understand there's many of you here, sitting here, watching online or whether it's at your home or in the worship center today where it's a little bit warmer. I understand you are in this truck heading downhill and you got no brakes. That while you're saying yes, you're also feeling guilty because if I went and looked at your search history, I'd be shocked. Your spouse would be shocked or it'd be erased. And we all know why it's erased. What I'm here to tell you is get before God, confess. Understand it is not harmless. It harms the object. It harms the person that's in that. It harms them. And it harms your relationships. That's exactly what these women are saying. Whether they're watching it or their person they're with is watching it, their partner thinks that is what sexuality is. And it's not connecting, it's not loving, it's being used. And it's wrong. It's wrong. Confess. And then confess to another human being. And then fine, I have some suggestions for you. You can email me or text me, or maybe I'll even try to put up something online where you can kind of find it, some links that you can find in the app or online later to places that you can go and meet with other Christian men or women who are also dealing with this. But what I would say to you is this: take it serious. Cut it out. So that you not only may save your own soul, but that you may restore some relationships that are more broken than they should be, because you have this in your life. And because the world is desperately in need of a people that will stand up and be radically devoted to a radical kind of love that not only addresses this out here, but addresses this in here and says, man, we got to go to the root cause. And if we keep making rules about this out here, we're going to keep getting this out here. Because the rules don't stop. They don't stop that stuff. Why? Because sin is nurtured in the heart, and then it comes forth out here. And therefore, it needs to be dealt with here. Amen? We'll give you some time to reflect and kind of come down a little bit. We'll come back here and do some business meeting, which will not be so serious. Will you pray with me? Dear God, Lord, there's a certain amount of conviction that comes from revelation, which is good. There's a certain amount of conviction that leads to shame and just wanting to give up. Dear God, I pray against that kind of conviction, but I do pray for real Holy Spirit conviction, even conviction that says, I'm ashamed of myself, I need to do better. But I pray, dear Father, for the kind of conviction that leads to confession, not shame, but confession. And Lord, I thank you that if we are faithful in confessing our sins, confessing our lust, confessing how we objectify one another, you are faithful to forgive us. You are just because Jesus died for my lust, and you're just in forgiving it. At the same time, dear God, I thank you that you don't want us to leave us in this truck heading for destruction. But by the power of the Holy Spirit, we have an emergency brake through you, through Jesus. And I pray that you would empower our lives not to just move on, but to deal with this and to be an example to the world, whether it be the lust for anything, the unfettered, just feed me what I desire attitude, dear God. Would you change our hearts so that the fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control, may show forth, perseverance may show forth, and that the true fruit of brotherly love, sisterly love, and overall just love for the world around us may come forth. Will you do that miracle work in us and through us? In Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen.